Hi YouTube friends! Today we're here to talk about the Sette 270 versus the Weber Workshop's key grinder. Not at all the same type of product, but I have these two grinders, so I figured I would do a little comparison. Now the thing is that this grinder is about 5 times the price of this grinder, so the question is it worth 5 times more? So let's go through all of the different features and specs and what really sets them apart. The Sette 270 is a grinder that I started with pretty much a year ago in my espresso journey. I got this grinder and it served me really well. Then I got the Weber Workshop's key grinder when I saw that go up, and I thought it was a beautiful piece of machinery and I was ready to upgrade. I have a full review of both of these grinders on my channel if you're interested. I will link them in the description and the cards up above. In terms of pricing, this is about 400 US and this is about 2,000 US, not including all the shipping and the tax and everything. This is a Sette 270, it's not the WI. In terms of build and design, obviously you can see some pretty big differences. First of all, metal, plastic. That's a big difference right there. Because this is all metal too, this is 9 kilograms, which is about 20 pounds. This comes in at 3.2 kilograms, about 7 pounds. So it's a huge difference in weight. 3 times the weight. Looks wise, that's subjective. I personally think that this looks a lot better than this. I've never really liked the look of this, but I knew it was a good grinder. Some people might like this type of modern looking type of museum look. It's not really my thing. I find it kind of looks like it would belong in a museum. And this is very industrial looking. This might not be up to other people's visual aesthetic standards either. This is a grinder that has a hopper. This is a single dose. And they both have a really small footprint, although this one's actually smaller than this one. Even though they both have really small footprints, there's a huge difference in the most important component of a grinder, which is the burr. And over here we have an 83 millimeter Mazer tin coated burr. And over here we have a 40 millimeter steel burr from Etzinger. Over 2 times the size of this one. If you want to know a little bit more information about the differences of the small burr and the big burr, you can actually go on my Weber Workshop's key review, and I do talk a little bit about what the advantages of a bigger burr are, what that coating does as well. The adjustment dial, as you can see, is very different. We have the adjustment dial here, up here painted. The lines don't really line up. That's something that quite bothered me. We have a stepped grind setting up here, and then you can fine tune with the stepless, but I found that it would move things around. And over here we have a grind setting that is stepped but at 5 microns and locks in. Over here we have an adjustable RPM from 30 to 150. It's also a lot less loud than this grinder. This grinder you had to stop your conversation / wake up anybody else that was in your home with you, especially if you live in a smaller place. Ooh, I don't know, maybe it's a benefit. When you first wake up and you go and make your first cup of espresso, yeah, this will definitely wake you up. Maybe everybody else in your household. This, quiet. Nice and quiet. I like that. I have the magic tumbler here, which is this device here, but they also have one that's a standard tumbler, which just funnels into a dosing cup. It's still single dose, so there is a limited capacity in terms of what you could fit in there. I can't remember exactly the capacity, but it was enough to do a pour over, but it wasn't enough to, let's say, grind a bag of coffee for your friend. Or you could do it in increments, but I guess you would have to really like that friend to do that. Whereas here, I could pretty much run an entire bag of coffee. Standard bag of coffee, the 340 gram type of bag. I did grind it for a friend once and I was able to do the whole thing and run it. This cup size was limited, so I actually had to do it in 2 shots either way. And then over here, you do have a little cup that comes with it, and this cup you can grind right into the cup, or you could close this up, portafilter to lock into here, and you could be more hands-free. And I would end up using a dosing funnel anyway to make this process a lot less messy and be able to just, as it was grinding, move it around so I could get the grinds more evenly in there. Over here, I guess you have 2 different ways of feeding your grinds into either a portafilter or a cup, and pretty much the same thing here. The magic tumbler is to put directly on a portafilter, and the standard funnel would be going into a funnel, which would sort of act as the same as this. So both have both features, but presented very differently. With the Sette 270, you can program up to 3 time-based grind settings. So if you have your hopper full, you could go like that, but I didn't find that to be that reliable. I would still have to check every now and then because as your grind gets older, blah, 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 you change the bean, whatever variables. It wasn't the most reliable thing, which is why I switched to single dose at some point, but you could also manually go. That was a little bit of a time-consuming thing, but then when I went to single dose, it was a lot quicker because I would pre-weigh everything, whereas here you don't have that, so you would weigh your coffee every morning or pre-prep your single dose, which I would highly suggest you do as well. I have a video on that if you're interested as well. I'll link everything that I talk about. In terms of retention, clumping, grind consistency, and all that, not an expert in any of this, but I found both of these to be very adequate when it comes to that. In terms of additional features, on the Weber workshops, we have an integrated bore brush, also comes in synthetic depending on your preferences. And that's a really cool thing that's included right there. In terms of flavor profile though, I found a huge difference between these two. And I have more details about the flavor profile of the Weber workshops on this review. But from this to this, it was very much more clarity, less body than the Sette 270. I think the Sette 270 was very much acting like a small conical wood. I haven't played with a flapper myself other than maybe having it at a cafe and not really being aware of what grinder they were using. According to other reviews I've seen and what James Hoffman said about the hand version, the HG2, this is kind of in between a conical and a flapper, which is really interesting. So you do get a lot of clarity, but I'm pretty sure with the flapper you would get even more clarity and less body. But I'm really happy with the flavor that this is getting. If you really like something that's a bit more on the fruitier side, this would be something that you would want, or flapper. And if you want something with a bit more texture and you go for medium darker roasts that are generally flavor nuts and chocolate, this would really probably be up your alley. I take my coffee with a little bit of maple syrup and milk as a flat white, and I could tell a difference from this to this instantly. So having it as a straight espresso would probably be even more pronounced. Now, the fun part of the video for me is the workflows. The workflows on these grinders were completely different. On the Sette 270, the workflow is, I would say, one that is more traditional. It grinds really quickly, especially when I was having to hold the portafilter with the dosing ring and hold it there. I couldn't really step away from the grinder. So when I was grinding, I was very much focused on grinding. I eventually started doing single dose on the Sette 270, but let's say there was already coffee in the hopper, then I would just grind the amount that I needed. But going to a single dose hopper just made it easier because I could just pre-weigh everything and then dump the amount in instead of having to periodically check and tear my portafilter. Because this is time-based and not weight-based like the WI, it would take maybe a couple of times to do that. So that's why I switched to the single dosing. After that, I would grind and wait. It was generally quick. I think something in the rounds of 5 to 7 seconds for a 18 to 20 gram dose. And then I would sometimes WDT. I would of course tamp, portafilter back on. I would put maple syrup into my cup, put the cup on the scale. I would pour milk into my frothing jug and then prep a wet towel to wipe my steam wand. I'd make the coffee and froth the milk and put it all together. Now the workflow for the Weber Workshops key, well, I guess there's technically two different workflows. Now I'm gonna only be talking about the low RPM since that's what I've been using mostly. With the low RPM on the Weber Workshops key, my workflow was very different. And it took a couple of times to get used to it. I would turn the button on first, a hot start, as they call it. Feed my beans into here. I don't RDT, and I walk away. Because it's gonna take something like 1.5 minutes to close to 2 minutes to grind, I take that opportunity now to do all my other prep work ahead of time. And sometimes I don't even have enough time to do all that prep work. So as this is grinding, I step away. I take the cup off of the BDB heat cup warmers. I put the maple syrup in there. I put it back onto the cup warmer, take the milk, fill up my frothing jug, then wet my towel for the steam wand. Sometimes I don't have time to do that and I have to do that afterwards, but that's generally my best case scenario situation. I'll hear that it's pretty much done. Sometimes I'll rev it up to 150 just in case there's any grinds in there that just need to get out. I'll take my portafilter off of the BDB, put it in my tamp holder. I'll link that down below too if you're interested in that one. Twist the magic tumbler off, put it on top of the portafilter, let the grinds fall down, do a little tap tap, tamp, then bring the portafilter back to my Breville Dual boiler, and then I'll take the cup off, put it on the scale, and start the extraction. Once I'm done with that, froth the milk, clean the steam wand, make my flat white. The very few end steps are pretty much the same. Sette 270, all of the different steps are kind of split up. So you have the grinding is very split up, you do that, then you make the coffee, then you make the milk. And with the key, I do all the prep work at the same time, and then it's just all action at the same time. So the workflow I'm talking about obviously applies to my specific case scenario where I'm adding maple syrup as a sugar and prepping milk for making a flat white. So if you're going from espresso to espresso, just espresso pure, then I guess you would just dance as you wait for this to grind. If you're doing a low RPM, I guess walk around, do a couple stretches. So you could use that opportunity for you time, I guess. And it took a few days to get used to this workflow, but now I'm very much used to this. And if I have to go back to this, I have to re-switch my brain on, and it's a little bit of a mental gymnastics because I don't generally switch between both grinders. I think if I was doing that regularly, it would be a different story, but I'm, for now, not somebody that has multiple grinders going at one time. I have one grinder at a time. So that is the workflow difference. It's rather significant. I don't think there's that many grinders that would have this workflow either. I guess other grinders like have very slow variable RPMs. There are a handful of grinders from what I could see online that have that. So I guess the other ones would have something of a similar workflow where it would take longer. You could go and do all your other prep work. There's a couple of tools that I got rid of with the key. I got rid of the dosing funnel because this basically acts as a dosing funnel once it's on my portafilter. Although I have to be a little bit careful because it's significantly bigger. So once it is on my portafilter, there is a little ledge, but if I'm not careful and I'm doing this, it could actually pop off and make a little bit of a mess. It's happened once or twice. I learned my lesson. Now I'm just a bit less vigorous with the dosing funnel grind shaking. Since it has an integrated WDT tool, I've gotten rid of my WDT tool. However, I don't really feel that this is like a real WDT tool. It just helps to mix things. It doesn't quite get the edges. So it does help a little bit, and I haven't had that many issues because I'm doing a very long manual pre-infusion and it's doing a good job at saturating the whole puck and getting a good even extraction. I am considering getting a proper WDT tool because in one of my previous videos of budget tools, I got something that was more budget. Then I watched a couple more videos with Lance Hendrick, and he was mentioning you need something with 0.3 millimeters to really get a good mix in the bed without making any new holes where the coffee could channel through. That is something that I may revisit and purchase. Also, something that's really great is I did use one of my old makeup brushes that was cleaned as a coffee grinder cleaner for the Sette 270. And I actually got rid of that. Well, I just put it back in my makeup bag, and I don't need that anymore because this comes with it, which I absolutely love. It takes up less space in my cupboards because it's right here, so I have to go dig for it. And so I do find myself cleaning a little bit more just because it's so much more convenient and easy. So, is this worth 5 times more than this? First of all, I would like to say that we are comparing apples to oranges. Sure, they're both fruits. They're both delicious. You get different enjoyments out of them, different pleasures. An apple, you can just straight up eat it. An orange, you gotta peel it. You gotta cut it or peel it. There's different ways to go about it, but their workflow is a little bit different. And what you get out of it is a little bit different, and the taste and flavor profile is a little bit different. It's a good analogy. This is going really far, this analogy. So, really depends on what your preference is, which one you would like to bite into, an apple or an orange. Which one's the apple and the orange? You let me know. Is it a better grinder? This is an interesting thing. There's a whole debate about this with one commenter on my Weber Workshops key review. To me, pricing is a little bit subjective. It is definitely objectively a better grinder. It has better specs. Those are facts. It's a bigger burr, it's a Mazzer burr, it's 83 millimeters conical versus 40 millimeter. Burr set alone, definitely more. Then you have the design, the materials, From what I can see, it's really well built. Additional specs, there's the integrated brush, the integrated WDT, the magic tumbler, the reliability and consistency. I like the fact that it's stepped, to be honest, because this one would drift sometimes. The pieces were cheap. Sometimes you'd have to put additional shims in there, which Baratza was really great at sending over. If you contact their customer service, fantastic. The customer service on here was excellent. The customer service here had room for improvement, and they seem pretty aware of it right now, so I think it'll only go up from there. So better is hard to quantify. So is it worth 5 times more? Also hard to quantify. That's really dependent on you, your needs. You know yourself best, so you can gauge what's important for you and what you're looking for in a grinder and what your budget is ultimately, because unless you're made of money, that is something that you have to factor in. Are you looking for just a grinder and you're on a budget? Are you looking for just a grinder that'll do the trick and you don't care about the design, you don't care about the looks, you don't care about all that extra bells and whistles? Sette 270 is great. I loved it. It worked really well for me. Also, if you like a little bit more body than clarity, all of that, perfect grinder. I would suggest, however, you get the Sette 270 WI in that case. It's weight-based. I find that so much better, but it is a little bit more expensive. And then this one offers completely something different, a different experience, a lot more specs to play with the variable RPM. Do they both grind pour over and espresso? Yes, they both technically can, although the pour over on this is not the best necessarily. Now, should you spend 5 times more? I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money, otherwise I would say you can always buy me a coffee. The buy me a coffee link is in the description down below. 1 year ago, or just a little over 1 year now, when I started this espresso journey, if you told me I would have spent the amount of money on this grinder as I did, I would have said, you are absolutely nuts. First of all, the budget that I had for espresso gear at the beginning, oh, so naive, so naive. Didn't realize the cost of these things. I was like, why would it cost so much? That's insane. Well, now that I'm in the espresso world, I understand. You could still make really great coffee with less expensive gear and that have less bells and whistles. So it really depends on if you like bells and whistles and if you have the budget for it. And maybe you start with this, you see how you like that, you save up, and then you do get this or another grinder. And this is all like a price of a new iPhone. Well, I guess it depends which iPhone you get, but yes, it's not cheap, but it's also not something that you're gonna replace every year or 2 or 3. For me, it was worth it, clearly, since I did purchase it, and I will be selling this one. Curious to know if this would be something that it would be worth it for you, and if you would spend that amount of money on this grinder. And if you have the Sette 270, ooh, do you have the upgraded Titus? Because I sure did after a while. I was looking into the niche, and I'm glad I got the key, because now that I know a little bit more about the conicals and flats and what coffees I actually enjoy drinking, which are the lighter, fruitier roasts, it makes sense to go for something like this or flat burr. So I'm glad I didn't bite the bullet on the niche, because that one got a lot of good reviews, but I didn't know. I just didn't know back then, but I know better now. My little comparison of these two, I hope that helped you or you found this entertaining in any way. Please click the like button, drop a comment, let me know your thoughts, share this video, subscribe, click the bell notification to be notified of any new videos, and I will see you in the next review. Bye.